Good morning, everybody. I'm here with Senator Richard Black. We have a big show today. We're going to be touching upon a bunch of different topics because I think we both agree that the world is in pure chaos right now. Not how we want it to be. We want it to kind of be a time of excelling peace and diplomacy. And there are some glimmers of hope that we will touch upon within the Trump administration and those that are close to him that are sending us glimmers of hope. But other than that, we also have some, mixed in with bad news and, and kind of just how the essence of the world is sometimes. So I think today we're going to start off with what is happening in the news right now, which is the Gaza peace plan. And, Trump's administration rolled out this 20-point peace plan that was signed a few days ago, and it's now being instituted where there is an official ceasefire in Gaza, and you have Palestinians that are entering back into Gaza City en masse. And I wanted to turn it over to Senator Black if you have any comments on that, what's really going on and how you feel, if it's a hopeful thing or something that we should be skeptical, given the fact that Israel has this ceasefire with Lebanon as well, that they are constantly infringing upon. I believe last night there was massive strikes in southern Lebanon, completely violating the peace plan. But this Gaza peace plan will be in 3 different phases. We're entering the first phase where some Israeli and Palestinian captives will be exchanged and aid will finally be allowed into the Gaza Strip. So what are some of your comments on that?
Yeah, it's all unfolding. Of course, you and I are both trying to figure out what's happening. It's pretty tenuous at this point. There seems to be a lot of hope, doesn't there? I mean, this feels different than some of the past overtures. And I think if you just look at the tremendous wall of humanity, all of these people who have just been chased around by Israeli bombers for 2 years. And, for what, probably the first 6 months of the war, look at that, that's amazing.
This is Jabalia. This is where they finally returned, and that's what they had witnessed is no homes. And
this is different than any other war that I've ever seen. There was enormous destruction in Europe and in Japan during the Second World War, particularly once Germany was beaten and Japan was beaten, but had not quite surrendered. There was just this phenomenal bloodletting that took place and destruction. And I remember as a child seeing pictures. I don't know whether it was old newspapers. They weren't that old at the time, but there was a little boy who was wandering through the bombed out rubble in Germany, obviously without parents, without relatives, just looking for something that he could find in the rubble that he could eat, and the tremendous destruction. But I have a background in bombing as a forward air controller in Vietnam. I controlled more bombs that were dropped than any other air controller for the 1st Marine Division, and that probably I'm pretty sure that meant more than anybody else in Vietnam. And the destruction was nothing. It was minuscule compared to this. And what's happened is in this age of AI and all of the surveillance satellites and so forth, the Israelis have made it a policy, and it's really not discussed much in the media, but their policy has been to destroy every structure that can support human life. Because this is a semi-arid area, it's basically desert. And so if you're going to live, you have to have shelter. And it has been Israeli policy, kind of unspoken. The idea is to systematically go through, destroy every form of shelter that can support human life so that when it's all over, the people simply die. And uh, that image that you just showed, where it's not that this building is damaged or this one is destroyed. If you look at that, you needed to have artificial intelligence to go through and to show you every single thing that can support a human life is wrong. And this is really what these people are going back to. Now, they haven't seen their homes in sometimes for the last couple of years, and now they're going back, and all they're going to find is piles of rock. And it is clearly a deliberate, pre-planned genocide, a holocaust of enormous proportions, and and to hear the media, they're all saying, "Well, can we trust Hamas to not to lash out in Israel?" What? There's nothing left. There is nothing to support humanity or to support any form of an attack on anybody. Clearly, from really almost the first week, Israel had destroyed uh, the Palestinian infrastructure and so forth. And since then, it's just been a matter of them running rampant and just slaughtering people in enormous numbers. So, so the whole thing is kind of touch and go. What do you think? What do you think will be the reaction of the Palestinians once they see that there's nothing left of their homes at all?
Well, I think they are definitely in the understanding that that is very much the case. They've been living in this very confined spot for 2 years, hearing the bombs being shuffled from one end to the other of this, 5 kilometer by 25 kilometer, spot. So I think that they are in perfect understanding of that they will be among the fortunate ones if they have any kind of structures standing that they could, be in. But I think it's more of a principled stance that they don't want to leave Gaza because they know that it is a part of this larger plan to never have them return back. So I think the quality of life doesn't matter as much as the principle of the fact that they are going to stay there so they are not ethnically cleansed, and then what has happened to Gaza will then happen to the West Bank is kind of my understanding of how the Palestinians are thinking on the ground in Gaza. Now there's this short little video I wanted to play, and then we can kind of touch more into this on, I believe it was Sky News that was talking about this migration of Palestinians that are from the north going back up to Gaza City, or they were in the south but going back up to Gaza City in the north of where they were from after some after 2 years, but during the Operation Gideon's Chariot 2, a lot of them were forced to leave, and some buildings were then leveled as well. So that will also, they might have left their home and then they're coming back to no home. So I just want to play this short clip, and then we could go into some of this interview that Hamas did with Sky News that talks about their hopefulness for this plan.
Okay, well, let's see what it says.
Across Gaza, a massive movement of people from their tented camps in the south pouring north, moving in their thousands. For the first time in 2 years, without fear of being attacked and killed. Families and lone figures all trying to head home. Jamal's is in the north of Gaza.
My family is waiting, and we packed our stuff as we may return home. But we are still suffering from the same struggles. There isn't much joy. But the ceasefire somewhat has relieved us from the pain of death and bloodshed, and our loved ones and relatives who suffered immensely in this war.
This was the scene that greeted people returning to Khan Yunis. Apocalyptic devastation. And many Gazans can't hope for much more than this. The flattened, obliterated remains of where they once lived.
I want to return back to the north, and I'm standing at the crossing of Netzarim. I want to go and find a place to shelter in with my children. We are 12 people. We've not found a shelter here. We wish to go back and find a place in a school or a camp to live there.
Israeli forces started moving out in darkness, pulling back not out of Gaza completely, but to lines they'd agreed to for the first stage of this agreement. In Tel Aviv, they wait and they pray that the ceasefire holds and Hamas releases its hostages. They know, though, this is a fragile truce with so many what-ifs. One of them, what happens if Hamas does not disarm? Answered for his part today by Israel's Prime Minister.
We are gripping Hamas from all sides in preparation for the next stages of the plan, in which Hamas will be disarmed and Gaza will be demilitarized. If this is achieved the easy way, so be it. If not, it will be achieved the hard way.
They wait to thank the man who made this happen. President Trump is on his way, we're told. By the time he gets here, it's hoped all the hostages will be out and the ceasefire still in place. In Gaza, they aren't wasting a moment, desperate to return to their homes and old ways of life, whatever is left of them. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well,
So I think that is, yeah, I'm sorry.
You know, the issue of disarmament is going to be, I think, a trigger for continued war, because I'm not sure how does Hamas completely disarm and then, you know, the Israelis simply walk in and just execute everybody. So I don't know. It's very tricky, and I would love to think that there was some way, some external force like the United States that would simply say, okay, it's got to stop. Just, you know, you can't, you know, slaughter everybody.
Mhm.
But I guess we'll just have to, see, you know, we'll have to see what evolves from it, but at least there'll be some momentum towards peace, so that maybe, you know, I think I would have advised Hamas to release these hostages long ago, because it's really given Netanyahu the excuse to conduct this genocide.
Yeah.
And you know, and it's so outrageous that there are, is it 20 or 22 live?
I believe it's around 20. Yeah, it
Okay.
might be 22, but I
Yeah.
think that it's important to note that Hamas had, I believe, just in the days after October 7th, had said they would return all of the hostages in exchange for their hostages that Israel's holding in all of these prisons. Majority of them don't have any charges. I know that there is a Dr. Abu al-Shifa, who is a pediatrician, who is still, he was captured after October 7th during all of this this conflict, this genocide, and they still have him without any charges. They just took him from the hospital after one of the hospitals that they had forced evacuation from. A part of these exchange of you know, prisoners back and forth, prisoners of war, you know, hostages, whatever you would like to refer to them as. They said that they are going to keep this doctor, even though this doctor doesn't have, Israeli government said they're going to keep this doctor, even though he has no charges. He was a pediatrician who was captured, you know, in hostilities while they were trying to forcefully evacuate this hospital.
Well, it would make sense, because they've been very systematic about destroying all of the hospitals, all of the clinics, gunning down doctors in the operating rooms when they've taken over hospitals. And so they want to be sure that people have no access to medical care. Even if you're getting an amputation, there's nothing that can be done. You just, somebody's howling and screaming while their legs being cut off. So it's consistent with what the Israelis have done to deny all medical attention to people. And so here's somebody with no charges, has not committed any crime, not under suspicion for anything, but he is a doctor, and he would be able to go and provide some care to people. So I'm not sure that I've seen any war that's been more brutal, more cruel and merciless than this one.
Yeah. And I think you're correct in the assessment that the point that is likely going to break this peace deal is this question of demilitarizing Hamas. I know that there was this interview that Sky News did with a Hamas official where he was thanking Donald Trump for putting pressure on the Israeli government and pleads that they continue to do so, but was very adamant on the fact that this new government that's going to be rolled in on phase 3, which they're floating Tony Blair will be the head of, is not welcomed by either the officials, the acting officials in Hamas, or the Palestinian people. But they also have made the assertion that they are not okay with the fact of demilitarizing. They are okay with the fact of it not being under the wing of Hamas, but they want something for the Palestinian people to have militarized deterrence in any kind of form or fashion. They said if it was, a separate government, that at least there was this militarized arm they would feel acceptable of, but this complete disarmament and leaving a people vulnerable after all of, I think it's 80% of their buildings have been leveled is a bit ridiculous to ask, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't seem completely irrational of a thought to put forward, of, the fact that is an insane ask if 80% of your buildings have just been completely annihilated by a country that would ultimately still remain control of the air, the sea, and the borders of your
I wonder whether Tony Blair is being inserted in this since he doesn't have any attachment with anything. He's the only qualification he has is he is a certifiable globalist who believes in wars to advance the global world order. And I just wonder whether he's the man who is supposed to complete the extermination of the population, and people can blame him, but he's not Israeli, he's not American, he's just sort of a free floater, and he can implement this idea of creating a sort of a wonderland on the Mediterranean where you have no Palestinian people any longer in Gaza. They're all dead or driven somewhere, and Blair settles a new population of people with a new ethnicity, new religion. There are no Jewish people in Gaza. They're totally zero. The only ones they're most all Muslim, but there are some Christians, and the idea is to exterminate all of them. Christian, Muslim, doesn't matter. And apparently, this idea has been floated that it would just simply become a wonderland for the Jewish population of Israel.
Yeah. Which Tony Blair being involved in all of this is especially nefarious. We remember his role pushing the war in Iraq. Been very, very important role that he played in pushing that. But Tony Blair has this Tony Blair Institute, which was speculated that it worked with this other organization called the Boston Consulting Group. Now, the Boston Consulting Group had what they claimed some rogue people who created this 30-page PowerPoint on the Gaza Trust, this new form of how they're going to redevelop Gaza, which would give the Palestinians cryptocurrency, I believe, for their land, and for them to be, basically ethnically cleansed elsewhere. So it seems very, very strange how they're still pushing this individual who is explicitly tied to a explicit plan to ethnically cleanse people with this Boston Consulting Group, which this Boston Consulting Group also has a vested interest in the redevelopment of Ukraine. They have a common thread of always going to these conflict areas over a profit for redevelopment after it has been destroyed. So I think that's very important to note as well. And just Tony Blair having a part in this is specifically nefarious. And like the interview had stated with the Hamas official, they said that the Palestinians have not forgotten what Tony Blair has done to Iraq and Afghanistan. So they're skeptical of his good intention at being a leader of this new formed government.
These globalists are, it's this elitist clique of people who really, they operate above the level of national governments. They operate at a higher level than the US government or the British government or the German government. They really answer to one another. It's sort of this consensus, and they're very Machiavellian. They're devoid of the morality that normal people would have. Certainly, almost the antithesis of Christianity. This idea that you simply can be cruel and merciless, and there are no consequences. So it is interesting that Tony Blair would be chosen as the architect of Gaza, since he was one of the architects of that horrid war in Iraq, where we attacked a very fine but small country, a unified, cohesive country, and just ripped it to shreds. I remember there were battalion commanders, American battalion commanders of tank outfits that were moving through Saudi Arabia into Iraq, and they said they were warned that there must never be a cross visible. If somebody had a tattoo, they had to wear something over it. If they had a cross they wore around their neck from the time they were a child, it had to come off, because you didn't want to offend the sensibilities of the Saudi Arabians, who were trained to behead people who wore a cross. And then these commanders would roll with tanks and blast their way into Iraq, and suddenly they're discovering that there are Christian churches there, there are Jewish temples, and there's no discrimination against Christians there. And I think Israel had a great deal to do with our war in Iraq, our war in Libya, our war in Afghanistan. The idea of just creating all of this chaos that would weaken all of their neighbors. And it's one thing for them to do it, but for us to get involved, it never could have been done. They could never have done it. We provide all the weapons, intelligence, all kinds of things. And And so Iraq was it was a great human tragedy. Wonderful, wonderful American troops who went in and fought, some of them fought very bravely. But they were certainly not on the right side of the moral side of that war. So it's just, you look at Gaza, it's just a continuation. I don't know where it ends. I'm not sure until the whole world is conquered and there's no country left that hasn't been taken over and destroyed. I'm not sure when the wars end.
Yeah. We've played before on the show the 7 wars that Wesley Clark had been, General Wesley Clark had been exposed to. That this plan of these 7 wars, we've taken out, or kind of Western forces, I would say, have systematically destroyed all 6. The last one would be Iran, which we see this fomenting by the Israeli government to want to push us into that one, and that one would be a larger than any of the other, I think, interventions that we've done in other countries, given its population, its how it's located, and so it's dangerous how there is that still kind of rolling. I know that there is some speculation that might happen, but I know that there is this other intervention that we have that we're now pushing for. If you want to pivot and talk about that, it's very interesting that how that's all been in the news. We had a show dedicated to it. Pardon me for a loss of words.
Venezuela.
The targeting of these ships off the coast of Venezuela, without any due process or verification from independent media sources, or just government officials coming out and giving us verification on the legitimacy that these ships being targeted are what they call narco terrorists. So I wanted to get some of your take on that. Before the show, we were talking about this article that just had dropped where you have Venezuela, the Maduro president, offering their oil and their gold, their contracts to mine such, to be boosted to American companies. And that would take precedent over Chinese companies, Iran companies, and Russian companies. Right now, Venezuela exports the most oil to China, which I feel is a big point that shouldn't be ignored of why we are pushing for such a regime change in Venezuela. So I wanted to get your take on that, and then we had some other, tactics that are in the works, as we discussed the Nobel Peace Prize winner, and all the likes of different comments that Trump has made in the past. So what was some of your
well, let's look at Venezuela. When during Trump's first administration, he was given intelligence that there was a major meeting of cartel leaders somewhere in Mexico, and he talked with his Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, and he said, "Look," he says, "why don't we just take them out with a cruise missile?" And Mark Esper later, he lost his job later on, but he wrote some sort of a book, and he said how he was aghast at the idea that President Trump would talk about using a cruise missile to take out these cartel leaders. When I saw that, I thought, I cannot believe this guy. Now, Mexico, it may be right on our border, but it is a narco state, meaning the cartels dominate the government, and the cartels are extraordinarily brutal within Mexico, far beyond anything that we imagine going on the other side of the earth. I have a contact in one of the major provinces down there who said they started having teenage kids, like high school kids, just disappear in large numbers. And the belief down there is that the cartels took them to harvest their organs. And the trafficking is a huge thing. The organs come to the United States for people who are too old and their hearts are given out or whatever. And they don't care where these things are coming from, and they don't know where they're coming from. But the value of a live, healthy teenage human heart is very high, and all of the other parts that are harvested, and there's a firm belief in areas of Mexico that this is cartel operation. The cartels, there's no limit to what they're willing to do. So to me, the weakness in the war on drugs, which started a number of presidencies ago, is that it was never a war. It was a police action. And you can never completely eliminate drug trafficking, but you can suppress it. And if you don't suppress it, then you have situations like we have in the United States, where sometimes there have been years where we've had 100,000 Americans die in a single year from fentanyl. Mm-hmm. And so to me, the war on drugs needs to be a war on drugs. And the president as the commander in chief, to me, has the authority inherent in the Constitution to take action against genuine threats to the safety of the country, and he's got the power to fire cruise missiles at a meeting of cartel leaders. Now, some people would disagree with that, understand it, but so I tend to be very aggressive in terms of the cartels, and I'm not one who feels that he needs some special authorization when he is interdicting boats where we have intelligence suggesting that they're carrying cocaine. It's not fentanyl in this case, it's cocaine. And I think there is probably some evidence and even some acknowledgement from Venezuelan and Colombian officials that, yeah, it's cocaine, but you should, it's not fentanyl, so why are you so worried, and this kind of thing. Well, where I have problems is with the United States knocking off sovereign countries and doing this without some authorization from Congress to declare war. There's a real live question. Are we planning to overthrow Venezuela or not? So what do you think?
I think that there is this pivot that is pretty clear. I think we spoke about it last time with the Hegseth and the Quantico generals meeting, where he explicitly states that the military has to prepare for interventions within our own hemisphere and to deter China. So you're having this pivot away from Southwest Asia. I think that that's very clear. You see that with, we spoke about it last night, the introduction to a new foreign military base in Idaho with the Qatari government. And so we're, now pivoting towards some interventions within our own hemisphere. We had all the way back in the first Trump administration, you had the sanctions, I believe it was some operations that weren't linked to the government, but they were contractors that were all American that tried to overthrow or attempted to do a coup You had the Trump administration and Western governments like Britain and some other European countries were just declared this Juan Guaido the official president, which was absurd in its own, because you had, I believe you have international bodies and NGOs go and verify the elections in Venezuela. And all of them actually say that they're actually more credible than the American elections. There's like 3 different forms of verification: your fingerprint, your ID, and I believe there's another form of a government identification to make sure that the vote that you cast is you as a citizen. So I found that very interesting that we don't speak upon that, the fact that, you have international and NGO bodies that go there and determine the legitimacy of these elections, have come back and made declarations that they find it more sound than the American process of the elections.
That's a pretty low bar, I'm afraid. the American, there's a case being reconsidered. I don't know if it's to the Supreme Court or if it's at an appellate court, but they're going to reopen. I think it is at the Supreme Court. They're going to reopen the question of whether some federal legislators had standing to challenge a practice in one of the states. I don't know whether it was Illinois or where, but this practice of allowing mail-in voting after Election Day. And I think it was just such an egregious affront to the voting process that they're re-looking whether they should have standing. A lot of these cases alleging voter fraud that out of the 2020 election where Trump supposedly lost, they just didn't get anywhere because there was no standing. Nobody had standing to sue. So it's like, nothing to see here. Just, ignore, all of the video evidence that, tremendous video evidence of fraud, 1,000 sworn affidavits by people who witnessed fraud, all of these things. And none of them really got to court. They just would sort of be sidetracked. And so people thought, okay, well, the people who contested the elections, they just lost. Well, they didn't exactly lose. Usually there just was not a hearing in court. They just sort of washed out. So anyway, that's an aside. But I know in Iraq, when we set up at the first election after we had invaded and destroyed the country, we put in place, we required everybody to have an indelible thumbprint, and they had to, when they went to vote, they had to have a thumbprint that could be verified. And, and it was a big thing in the news at the time. You'd see all these people with these purple thumbs from having voted. Mm-hmm. Well, in our country, you don't have a clue who votes. You just, you have these drop boxes, these unattended drop boxes. People manufacture thousands of fake ballots and they dump them in there. And you don't have any way of identifying who put it in there or who made out the ballot. So, so our system is utterly corrupt, and I'm not surprised because it is a low bar to say that their system is more credible in Venezuela than it was in the United States. But this guy Juan Guaido, I mean, it was almost comical. It's like a Peter Sellers movie. They picked a guy who had been in the Venezuelan legislature. He was kind of a backbencher. There was a 3-way race in his particular district, and he won a 3-way split. He didn't have a majority of the votes in that one little district. He served for 1 term, and the next thing we decided, you know what? This Juan Guaido, I think he speaks English. Let's let's make him the president of Venezuela.
Mhm.
And when we did, the Venezuelan people were mystified that who is this person? Nobody had ever heard of him. He didn't have any connection with Venezuela. He, outside of some tiny little neighborhood somewhere, nobody knew who the guy was. And
Yeah.
we decided, well, he actually swore himself in. He was the kingmaker of himself. He, hail to me, I'm the king. I swear to myself that I will be true to myself. And it was a joke. And we got all these other countries to recognize him as the leader. And then, he just sort of petered out because nobody took him seriously. So, here we are, and now there's a new woman who's come forward, and she's
Yeah.
gonna be the next leader.
Yeah, who we're speaking about is the Nobel Peace Prize winner of 2025, this Maria Corina Machado, which she ran against Maduro in 2024 election. And we were speaking about it backstage, that the rhetoric that's used, that Maduro is this dictatorist regime. Granted, I don't know if he's perfect or not. I'm not a Venezuelan resident, but I know that I don't want my government going and doing a regime change war over there.
No, I don't think he's any great shakes. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, but we're coming at it as an American citizens.
You and I don't have any business selecting who should be the leader of the Venezuelan people. That's really,
exactly,
I think,
yes,
where we're coming from.
So the rhetoric that is used in the media is that Maria Corina Machado was detained after the election. But I had showed you backstage, and I believe that we would all be in agreement that if an American citizen had conducted themselves in this manner, that they may be detained, let alone investigated. In 2018, Maria Corina Machado would send letters to Benjamin Netanyahu, the president of Argentina, and the American government, persuading them to do military intervention in her country to rid it of terrorism and corruption. If we had a political figure, let's say, I don't know, AOC or something, that was boasting how, Mexico needs to come in and liberate her country from this corruption, we would not look at it and be like acceptable of that fact. We would understand how there may need to be an investigation at the very least. So I know that is used as a tactic to persuade people on how Maduro may be a stifling free speech in his country, is the detainment of Maria Machado after the election.
Why do you think she addressed it to Netanyahu?
Very, very strange. But I know it was during the first Trump administration, and she was currying favor with the Israeli government, saying that if she were the leader, she would recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. So I imagine that it's to curry favor with the Anglo world that puts a lot of precedent on the Israeli legitimacy question. That's kind of my theory on that, is that it was like a wink and a nod that I will play ball with you, and being on your side in this kind of moral question of this. That's just my take on it, because we know that the Israeli government, A, has their own issues to worry about, but B, they don't really have that big of a military apparatus to go and liberate the country of Venezuela, which is huge. So I think that was more of just a I'll play ball with the Western world kind of hood nod. So that's my take on that. And
and now there's no doubt that we can overthrow the government. It's Venezuela is not a very strong country, but I just I don't see where we gain. We controlled Venezuelan oil when we wanted Venezuelan oil. I'm not sure whether we really want more oil on the markets, because the markets are kind of flooded with oil. The oil price is down to where it's a little bit of a problem. It's once it gets below $60 a barrel, it seems to be kind of a magical point at which you just don't have any more oil drilling. And we want drilling to take place in the United States because it's good for jobs in the U.S. And so if you turn on the spigots in Venezuela, I think, has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. And it's sort of been shut off. If you suddenly open it up, you'd have this flood of oil, and the global price of oil could go down to $30 a barrel or $20 a barrel. And it'd be very disruptive to economies that rely on a certain price. So I don't know. To me, that's kind of a complicating factor. Is if you make it easier to flood the world with oil, I think Chevron may have some continuing relationships with Venezuela. Venezuela ousted the American oil companies in large measure, but some of them still have deep ties to Venezuela, and they'd like to reopen their facilities there. So it's interesting to see how that all is going to play out. But
Yeah,
I think you mentioned to me also there was this brouhaha over Qatar, that they have been told that they can open up some military facilities in Idaho.
Yes. So they will be trained. It's an Air Force base. They will be trained with to fly American jets in Idaho. Signed 2 days ago, I believe, with Pete Hegseth and one of the Qatari representatives. I find that very interesting. That it's just given this sequence of events of you have the Israeli government who conducted airstrikes in Qatar, Qatari government kind of posturing like they were angry, and then this kind of this comes into play. You also have, I believe there was I can't remember the price tag, it was $20 billion of a deal that the Qatari government was doing with the American government. You have the Air Force, the president's jet, the president's plane, that is going to be given by the Qatari government. Granted, it only lasts during Trump's administration, but I feel like that is was a lead up to this as well, with this air base, and as and we have to make mention that the largest base that the Americans have is in Qatar. So
I've been to Qatar. The country is almost nothing except for gas wells in the desert, and this is a sandy desert. It's just sand dunes, monstrous sand dunes, and we stayed at a hotel. I was part of a delegation from the United States Congress, and they had just several selected members from state legislatures. I think there were 3 of us, and there were probably 30 of the congressmen. And anyway, they've got zillions of dollars there, and so they had it set up to where anytime we wanted to go somewhere, we could go down and we could say, well, we want a brand new Mercedes or brand new Cadillac or brand new BMW or whatever, and we want a driver, and you take us where we tell you to go. And we wouldn't quite say it that way, but they literally ask you, which kind of car do you want? And they just have one of those brand new cars. Anyway, so my wife and I decided to go down. So we went down, and we're not real glitzy people. So what we asked for, we told the driver of the car as we were driving out, we said, well, we'd like to see the old part of Qatar, and the old traditional part. And he says, there is no old part. He said, there's not. He says, everything is new in Qatar. And so we ended up going to a small shopping mall, and I wish I could have gotten a photo of this, but there was, the women in Qatar all are completely covered. They just have a slit for their eyes, and they have this long flowing gown. And there was one of these women, a young woman, and she's sitting on a bench, and behind her was one of the what's the name of this, the American underwear store for fancy underwear for women?
Victoria's Secret, Calvin Klein.
Victoria's Secret.
Okay.
So here it is in this ultra conservative Islamic state. There's Victoria's Secret, and behind this woman who's completely in black with her eyes like this, directly behind her is this huge poster of a woman lounging in very skimpy, fancy underwear.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just such a, I thought, wow, I would love to have a photo of that. But anytime that you would take a photo of women, you knew, they were so fearful of it. Somebody would punish them if there was a photo, even though you couldn't see anything. This little slit. So we couldn't take a photo, but it's sort of frozen in my mind. This woman's sitting there so austere, and behind her is Victoria's Secret.
Mm.
So anyway, it's a crazy country, and other than gas wells and a few fancy hotels like this, the other thing that they have is the headquarters of United States Central Command, which is the brain center for planning all of the wars that we do in the Middle East and some in Europe. And so the government of Qatar was rightly offended when they were hosting a peace conference where negotiators from Israel and Hamas were to come together to negotiate over peace. And the Israelis, true to form, they always do this, they tried to kill the negotiators because they didn't want peace. They want the war to go on. And somehow the Hamas people got tipped off. I don't know where that happened, but they did. None of them were killed by the Israelis. The Israelis declared, immediately after, we have just wiped out all of the Hamas leadership. And as it turned out, they may have killed a few janitors and hotel clerks, but they didn't kill any of the Hamas people at all. And so the emir of, or whatever he's called, the head of Kuwait, was justifiably and understandably stunned by the fact that here he's, a big part of his population is American soldiers, and he obeys everything the Americans tell him to do, and they can do anything they want in his country. And all of a sudden, we overlook the fact that this closest of allies is being bombed by the Israelis. So I think that probably angered even the Trump administration that the Israelis had done that. And my guess is that finalizing that deal for the for the aviation facility for the Qataris was a little bit of a, here's something we could do for you. We're sorry that all of this happened. But it just adds to the sort of the chaotic atmosphere these days in foreign policy, where we continue, Russia continues to win the war in Ukraine. We continue to feed weapons to it, and we just can't seem to overcome the push by the London bankers to keep the war going. And so we'll see. I would love to see peace come to Gaza.
Yeah, same here. I'm skeptically hopeful, but I think what the points that we raised on where this could all fall apart are definitely something we should keep an eye out for. And I know we're running out of time today, but I think we wanted to get to Melania coming out and saying she had a direct channel with Putin, which I think probably you and I would agree that revelation seems like that probably would have put her better on the list to be the Nobel Peace Prize winner than this Maria Machado woman. But,
that's an interesting thought. It's interesting. Melania has been in touch with Putin. They've had exchanges, very friendly exchanges, and she's raised this issue that where the Ukrainians have said, hey, look, when the Russian army comes in, they remove the children from the battlefield, and they're taking them and they're putting them as foster kids in Russia. It's a little bit of a complicated issue because most of the children in the areas that the Russians have captured, they don't speak Ukrainian, they speak Russian. Often their families are dead. So what do you do? Do you say, well, okay, we're going to take this Russian-speaking child with the Russian culture, Russian heritage, and we're going to send him to this strange place where they don't even speak the language? Or do we just take them and put them in a Russian home? I'm sure, wars aren't like surgical affairs, and I'm sure there are some children who get swept up and they should justifiably be returned to Ukraine. And apparently with this back channel, they seem to be trying to sort it out, and they have returned 8 of the children. And I'm sure there are more. I'm sure there are more who should be returned to Ukraine, and I'd like to see them continue to develop that and try to bring some justice there.
Exactly. Above all else, just the communication is the key part that I think is what is the glimmer of hope in all this. I know that we've gone over time, but I hope this was a good show for everybody, and I would encourage everyone to join us next week to focus on the news. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Morgan.